English translation 894th contact. Tuesday, the 6th of August, 2024, 7:49 hours.
Hello, you are already here, although I thought you would not be coming until this afternoon. But you are welcome and greetings.
Greetings also, Edward, my friend. What is the matter that you are calling me?
The point is that an official address is to be created for the internet, because the reorganization by the committee apparently requires this. In the future, a FIGU association address should be valid worldwide, which should have validity as Verwaltung at FIGU, org, and should only be addressed to the person acting as the secretary. This is because in the future everything will have to go through the actuary, because everything that is decided and determined by the group as a whole will come together with him. What should then be the case is that the actuary is instructed to prepare a necessary letter regarding the group's decision and to hand it over to the person who is appointed to carry out the decision.
I cannot decide that, because the committee has to be consulted on that, which I will, of course, arrange immediately.
Good, that is actually all I had to ask and why I called you here. But since you are here, I would like to show you the article I have from InfoSperber, which I am sure will interest you. It deals with political matters, but it should also be interesting for us. Even if we are not politically active, but know what is really going on, even if everything is denied, disputed, and swept under the carpet, so that the public does not find out. Here, the InfoSperber is speaking out publicly for the first time, saying that in certain countries, especially in America, crimes are ordered and committed, and that without the perpetrators, who order the crimes, ever having to account for them or being punished for them. In this article, America in particular comes under fire, with America-friendly people hanging onto it and praising it to the skies, even though its crimes stink to high heaven all over the world. Either the America-friendly people are as lowly intelligent as beans and do not recognize what America is really doing on Earth, or they are just as irresponsible as the state criminals of America, who effectively walk over millions of corpses and destruction in their hegemony delusion. But here is the article.
InfoSperber, Sunday, 4th August 2024. The Vietnamese child with birth defect because the parents were exposed to the defoliant Agent Orange. CR. The criticism of Trump's immunity is off-target. Helmet Sheben, 29.07. 2024.
In Vietnam, the USA has hundreds of thousands of crippled children on its conscience. No U.S. president has been charged for this.
Donald Trump is now above the law. To stay in power, he could instigate a military coup as president or order the Navy SEALs, a special unit of the U.S. Navy that is part of the U.S. Special Operations Command, to kill a political rival, and nothing would happen to him. He now also enjoys immunity beyond his term of office, sanctioned by the Supreme Court. These are the examples that Sonia Sotomayor, a judge at the U.S. Supreme Court, used in her dissenting opinion to express her disagreement with the court's decision on immunity. She said that she was deviating from the majority opinion out of concern for democracy. Numerous media outlets, including the Zurich-based Tages-Anzeiger, Die Zeit, Süddeutsche Zeitung and others, reported on this minority opinion of Judge Sotomayor, creating the impression that the rule of law in the USA is on the brink of collapse. The Neue Zürcher Zeitung NZZ said that the ruling of the Supreme Court grazes a fundamental principle of the country. In almost all democratic countries, members of the government enjoy immunity for official acts, also in Switzerland. Only private criminal offenses can be prosecuted. This is to prevent presidents or members of the government from being afraid of subsequent criminal charges and thus not being as free in their decisions as their mandate requires. However, in Germany, France, or Spain, presidents or members of the government can be prosecuted for past official acts after they have resigned. President Trump is facing charges relating to his last official acts, which he may have used to prevent Joe Biden from taking office. Now the Supreme Court has prevented Trump from being prosecuted by granting presidents lifelong immunity.
Lifelong immunity has been the practice for decades.
But the Supreme Court has merely confirmed a decades-long practice. Since the founding of the United States in 1776, presidents have almost regularly committed crimes during their terms of office, but were virtually never prosecuted after leaving office. Therefore, the Supreme Court's decision does not in any way undermine a fundamental principle of the country, as the NZZ wrote.
Executions without trial.
The most recent example is the systematic execution of human beings who are defined as a terrorist threat and therefore killed by drones as a preventive measure, without a court having a say in the matter. Not a single American president has ever been brought to trial for this practice, which is considered a crime by many lawyers around the world. Neither in the USA nor outside the USA. For his book, Die Weltbeherrscher, The World Rulers, journalist Armin Wertz researched, among other things, the use of drones by the USA abroad. In 25 pages, he lists around 500 drone attacks that became public between 2004 and 2016. Entire apartment complexes were pulverized in this way by airstrikes. The number of so-called collateral deaths is unknown. The procedure is based on Article 51 of the UN Charter. After 9/11, the U.S. Congress and the UN Security Council authorized the U.S. to wage a war on terror.
300,000 civilians killed after lies.
At least 300,000 civilians were killed in the Iraq War, which was justified with lies and which UN Secretary General Kofi Annan described as illegal. However, President George W. Bush was not prosecuted for this after his term of office, neither in the USA nor by an international court. The USA does not recognize any international court that could hold it responsible for war crimes.
Cocaine for weapons in Central America.
Ronald Reagan, President of the USA from 1981 to 1989, started a covert war against Nicaragua to overthrow the Sandinista government, which he believed to be a Trojan horse for communism in Latin America. The financing of a counter-revolutionary mercenary force, known as the Contras, was never authorized by the U.S. Congress. The war, which officially did not exist, was secretly financed by drug trafficking and arms deals with Iran. At an airfield in Mena, Arkansas, pilot Barry Seal maintained a fleet of transport aircraft that flew weapons to Central America for the freedom fighters. On the way back, they made a detour via Medellin in Colombia and loaded cocaine and crack pasta básica. Barry Seal is considered one of the most successful drug smugglers in history. The street value of the drugs he imported was estimated by U.S. authorities at between $3 and $5 billion US. Seal conducted a large part of his business on behalf of the CIA. When the whole thing blew up, Washington tried to protect the president. Ronald Reagan was said to have known nothing about it. Oliver North, a former U.S. Marine officer, was presented as the guilty party. He was an official advisor to the National Security Council and had organized both the cocaine for arms deal and secret arms deals with Iran. North was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but was soon acquitted due to procedural errors. Barry Seal was shot dead on the streets of Louisiana on 19th of February 1986 before he could testify before a grand jury. Ronald Reagan also remained unchallenged after his presidency.
Acts that violate the law and international law went unpunished.
U.S. presidents regularly deceived and lied to their people by repeatedly conducting military interventions and wars of aggression in secret and denying the U.S.'s involvement. In 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower had overthrown Jacobo Arbenz, the democratically elected president of Guatemala, in a CIA operation. The American people were kept in the dark about the fact that it was less about the communist threat than about the interests of the banana company United Fruit. President John F. Kennedy ordered a CIA-led attack on Cuba. When the invasion of the Bay of Pigs failed, it was said that Kennedy had not supported it. Presidents Johnson and Nixon waged a top-secret bombing campaign in Laos. 150,000 human beings were killed or displaced in an area that had been declared a free fire zone. We must not look away. One of hundreds of thousands of children, Presidents Lyndon B. Johnson and Richard Nixon, were never held accountable for the lies used to justify the Vietnam War and the use of Agent Orange between 1962 and 1972. This defoliant poison resulted in hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese children being born with severe birth defects and becoming cripples. Estimates vary between 150,000 and 500,000. Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon were also never held to account after their presidencies. Ronald Reagan sent U.S. Special Forces to El Salvador to support a military regime that used death squads to murder opposition priests, nuns, professors from the Universidad Católica, and an archbishop at the altar. In 1999, Bill Clinton led a NATO attack on the rest of Yugoslavia without a UN mandate. The forcible separation of Kosovo from Serbia is still considered by many states to be a violation of international law. President Bush had prisoners transferred to other countries for torture, for example to Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and Kosovo, in order to circumvent U.S. laws. The torture methods used in the permanently installed torture centers in Bagram in Afghanistan, Abu Ghraib in Iraq, and Guantanamo in Cuba were appalling. President Barack Obama waged a war in Libya that Congress had not authorized. The lawyers in his administration legitimized this by arguing that it was not. The 30,000 NATO airstrikes on Libya were therefore not a war. That is why the Congress's War Powers Resolution was not required. None of these presidents were prosecuted after leaving office.
No president of the USA, China, or Russia will ever stand before an international court of law.
Experience shows that when it comes to their so-called security interests, great powers do not care about international law or the attempts of the United Nations to establish international justice. No U.S., Chinese, or Russian president will ever stand before the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The principle always applies. You hang the little ones, you have to let the big ones go. The Federal Criminal Court in Bellinzona may sentence an African minister to 20 years in prison for human rights violations, as recently happened. But the Federal Prosecutor's Office will never dare to take on the United States. Power politics takes precedence over law and justice. According to the U.S. Congress's Research Service, between 2021 and 2023, the U.S. carried out counterterrorism operations in 78 countries, including combat operations with troops on the ground in at least 9 countries. President Joe Biden will not have to answer for the legality of these actions after his presidency ends. Orno Hathaway, a renowned lawyer at Yale Law School, recently published an article in the leading U.S. political magazine Foreign Affairs entitled, "For the Rest of the World, the U.S. President has always been above the law." She reminds us that American presidents have been able to break the law with impunity time and again, inflicting death and destruction on the civilian population. If the Supreme Court now grants a president lifelong immunity, it is nothing new under the sun.
It is incomprehensible that such a thing can happen.
I also think so, but nothing can be done about it, because corresponding to the lousy governments of these countries. Their peoples do not have the might to do something good about it. Because for that, there would have to be a people's unity throughout, which is usually not the case, because there are always many government-friendly people working against it. On the other hand, it is dangerous to say anything against it, because opponents of such evil laws are often simply liquidated. Consequently, nothing can be done to end such things.
That should not be the case.
Of course, it should not be the case. But it cannot be changed, because we are here on Earth, and unfortunately laws prevail that are unjust, and parts of the lowly intelligent or the pseudo-thinking of the populations approve of everything.
I am aware of that. But now, my dear friend, I have to go again because I have to adhere to the committee's regulations. Goodbye, but call me if the need arises.
Of course. Goodbye, Quetzal.